Breaking news. Please stand by for another C2C World News Now current event.
As the most powerful countries in the world bicker. A city that, in the words of a UN diplomat, will be destroyed by Christmas.
The attack on a United Nations humanitarian aid convoy near the Syrian city of Aleppo last month, which up until now, Washington has blamed on Russia. It now appears new details are showing that it was actually carried out by one of the terrorist groups present in the area. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said. The aid convoy was attacked on the night of September 20, 2016. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported 20 civilians killed and 18 vehicles destroyed. The Pentagon alleged that the convoy was destroyed from the air, and that Russian warplanes were present in the area, concluding that it was a Russian strike that was responsible. Russia denied the accusation and said a U.S. drone was monitoring the convoy, so Washington should know the truth about the attack. Putin also commented on the disagreement at the UN Security Council that eventually led to the cancellation of his visit to France. Paris indicated that it wouldn't be comfortable hosting the Russian leader after Moscow blocked a resolution it had submitted.
I've said before that we believe Russia has the wrong strategy. Despite what the Russians say, we have not agreed to cooperate with Russia.
As you know, we are not coordinating on a military-to-military basis with the Russians. That has not changed. She had to say.
Russia decided to join the Assad regime, escalating the conflict, and perhaps worst of all, it's self-adopting some of the regime's worst practices, hitting hospitals, hitting refugee camps. And they're calling this emergency meeting? Really? Now, because of a single airstrike, a strike that if it struck regime forces, did so in error.
Yes, the UN has put on hold all urgent aid, humanitarian aid deliveries across conflict lines in Syria following this attack. Now, here's what we have in terms of what had occurred on Monday. 18 of 31 trucks came under aerial bombardment as they were trying to deliver much-needed urgent humanitarian aid to a distressed town in Syria. Now, 20 people were killed in that airstrike, one of whom was a senior aid worker with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. Now, according to UN information, the attack had occurred as these trucks were trying to unload their cargo, and a warehouse was also attacked. This occurred in the rebel-held town of Orem El Kurba. Now, UN aid chief Stephen O'Brien had quickly issued a statement in which he expressed disgust and horror at the attack, and saying that if it is determined that this was a deliberate act targeting humanitarian aid workers, then this could count as a war crime. And we heard earlier as well, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was extremely angry over this attack and made those sentiments very clear.
He's been clarifying Russia's position on the Syrian conflict to foreign journalists at an international investment forum in Moscow a bit earlier. Our correspondent Ilya Petrenko is there for us.
Vladimir Putin was speaking at an investment forum, and the moderator even had to point that out to the audience at the Q&A because Syria quickly came up instead of economics. Vladimir Putin addressed the issue of Russia being widely accused by the West for the collapse of the peace process in Syria. In particular, he mentioned the devastation of a UN humanitarian convoy near Aleppo in September.
Russia is now being blamed in all crimes without any proof. Let's just take, for example, the attack on the humanitarian aid convoy. We know who hit it. It was one of the terror organizations on the ground. And we clearly know that the Americans are aware of this as well. But they prefer blaming Russia without proof. That's clearly not what can help the situation. This manner of acting at an international level is called pressuring and blackmailing. But with Russia, that has never worked and never will work.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin also went on to explain Russia's veto at the UN Security Council against the French resolution. He said that when the foreign ministers of Russia and France met last week, certain terms of the French resolution were discussed, and also it was meant to consider Moscow's amendments to it. Well, the Russian president pointed out that instead, Mr. Arrow went straight to Washington after that to talk to John Kerry, and when they both spoke, accusations against Russia were thrown out again, and also the resolution that was put forward at the UN Security Council turned out to be completely different, where essentially everything was blamed on Assad and the Russian army as well. Vladimir Putin believes that it was something that was done on purpose. He called it a blackmail campaign on the highest level by Western officials who, according to Vladimir Putin, by doing so, were only deceiving their own people.
In some ways, it suited everybody for this to be seen as a little bit mysterious and for the blame to be muddied. Now, given all the surveillance technology that there must be over Syria at the moment, it's quite hard to believe that there wasn't very specific knowledge of who did it. But I think that at least at the time, there was one very compelling reason why the Americans and the British and others preferred to see Russia's hand behind it. And this was the fact that barely 24 hours before, the Americans, helped by the British, had inflicted an airstrike on Syrian government troops. Ever since then, it's been the attack on the convoy that has been blamed for breaking that crucial ceasefire, not the fact that there was this mistaken or otherwise attack on the Syrian government troops.
It's self-adopting some of the regime's worst practices, hitting hospitals, hitting refugee camps. And they're calling this emergency meeting? Really? Now,
the US State Department's responded, meantime, to an RT report documenting how terrorists in eastern Aleppo are preventing the civilian population from leaving. We're going to hear Washington's view in a moment, but first, here's a quick reminder of what we found. Our news crew managed to film the only flags that can be seen over the east of the city. You've got to really focus on it to see it. Well, that was quite clear. One of them belongs to Jabhat al-Nusra, the other to ISIL. Although Islamic State's not known to be present there, certainly in any great numbers, it looks like their sympathizers at least are. And on top of that, we spoke to many locals who claim they live in constant threat of terrorist sniper fire, day in, day out.
Nowadays, people there, all of them, they are a big jail. These tourist people, they not allow anybody to come here because they think this is a card to play with the government.
This has been a C2C World News Now current event. Stay safe, everyone.